back to my channel. Before I jump into this, I changed up my lighting a little bit in this video. Let me know how you like it. I'm just borrowing my sister's ring light and seeing if the lighting is any better for you guys. I don't know. Let me know down below. I know some of you probably won't care, but I'm trying to kind of step up my filming a little bit. I plan on getting a new camera soon and a new microphone just to make your experience a little bit better. So again, just let me know down below. And now we're going to jump straight into today's case, which is the disappearance of Emma Fillipoff. Now, you guys have suggested this like crazy. This is one of the most high-profile cases in Canada. It still is. In Canada itself, I think only 5% of missing persons cases ever extend past 24 hours, 48 hours, tops, maybe a couple of months. But she has been missing since 2012. So this is one of those 5% of cases that just somehow isn't solved in Canada. This is also one of the few cases where, despite there seeming to be a lot of information, a lot of evidence, there's really nothing to rule any particular theory out. You know, when investigators go into a case, they have death by suicide, runaway, taken hostage, foul play. They have a small list that they narrow things down from. And this case, there's circumstances in it that almost fit perfectly every single one of those scenarios. So it has baffled Canadian investigators for years now. Emma Fillipoff was 26 years old when she disappeared from out front of the Empress Hotel in Victoria, British Columbia on November 28th, 2012. Emma was a very free-spirited, artistic, I like to describe her personally from looking through things as whimsical. She was just very, very unique. She wrote a lot of poems. She didn't believe in technology like cell phones. She wasn't that kind of person. She would rather be outside. She wanted to be exploring, hiking by the ocean, or reading books in the library. She did a lot of meditating, and she spent a lot of her time speaking to the homeless population. She was always a very private person when it came to her own, I guess, feelings and emotions and suffering and thoughts. She was a magnet to anyone who was ever around her. She was just someone that you were drawn to. She was warming and welcoming, and she always would listen, and she had this just kind of energy about her that drew everyone to her. So Emma came to Victoria in 2011 from her home in Perth, Ontario. She had always dreamed about going and living out west. When she finished school, she immediately knew that she wanted to go and explore the world. Her parents had recently gone through a divorce, and it seemed to affect her a lot. She was an incredibly empathetic person. And she spoke about all these things in her journals and the poems that she always wrote about how she took on everyone else's pain and still managed to put out a smile at the same exact time. So her parents' divorce really got to her, and she just went away. She wanted to go explore. She wanted to find herself and really learn how to deal with her own feelings, since she spent a lot of time helping others deal with theirs. So when she left home to go to Victoria, she had absolutely no plan. She had no job lined up. She didn't have a home lined up. She just kind of packed her things and left. And despite not having a plan, she told all of her friends at home over and over again, I just have a feeling that something good is going to happen in Victoria. I just know it. When she first arrived, she lived with a friend for a few months. She got a quick job as a barista that didn't last very long, and then she just decided she wanted to wander. So she spent time living in various areas. She lived on boats a few times. She couch surfed from a few other friends. She got a few other small jobs. She worked in a hotel for a while, where she also traded her work for housing. She did a whole bunch of just wandering around Victoria. She spent a few nights camping out in the woods. There are reports that she slept in trees a few times. This was just the person she was. She just wanted to live her life as full as she could and experience as much as she could. But from February to November of 2012, she ended up staying in the Sandy Merriman house, which was a woman's shelter. And she never told her family this. When she spoke to her family, it was through emails. They were usually very cryptic poems, nothing ever negative. She always seemed very happy, but she just, like I said, kept to herself a lot. So when she would talk to her parents, and what she would show on the outside was just this happiness and excitement and optimism. So she didn't tell her parents about this house because I'm pretty sure she thought they would be worried, think that she wasn't out there experiencing the things she thought she was going to, and she was very independent, and I think she just really wanted to make it work, and she didn't want to alarm anyone or raise any bells. While staying there, she got a seasonal job at the Red Fish Bluefish, which was a seasonal, as I said, restaurant at the harbor, and she seemed to really enjoy this job. And her last day was on October 31st, 2012, and when she left, she promised everyone she was working with that she would be there the following season. But this is when things really started going downhill for her. Just before she stopped that job, she started telling her friends she wanted to live a more pure lifestyle. She cut out alcohol, cigarettes, coffee, sugar. She was already vegan, but she also started cutting back her overall food consumption and started drinking an excessive amount of water. But that wasn't the only concerning change. She then started withdrawing a lot from her friends. As I said before, she was a very, very social person. She made friends with pretty much anyone, but at this point, she was refusing to go out and do anything. She didn't want to be invited anywhere. At one point, she was supposed to go to Mexico with one of her friends, and again, her vibe, she wants to explore. She never would have turned that down, but last minute she canceled. She also started behaving a little bit paranoid and had very negative and fearful behavioral changes. She just overall seemed like she was slowly changing into a completely different person. To her friends, it just appeared like she was having issues with the seasonal change. It gets incredibly cold during the fall and winter in Victoria, and she just wanted to walk around barefoot on the beaches and around the city. I guess with the fall and winter seasons kind of looming upon her, she just started getting a little bit panicky, or at least that's what her friends thought was happening. In July, when all of this slowly started happening, she decided to buy herself a van, and she wanted this huge van to be able to travel around outside of Victoria, because since she had moved, she had just stayed in Victoria, and being the transient type of person she was, she wanted to explore more. She was incredibly ecstatic about this van, but it ended up giving her more problems than doing anything positive. There were a few times where she was asking around for a mechanic. She had it towed to multiple different parking lots, and she never actually went anywhere in it. Because of her change in behavior and her obvious distress that she was in, one of her friends came forward to Emma and said, you know, you need to talk to your mom. You need to call her, figure something out, tell her how you're feeling, and I think that would make you feel better, and you should also get a membership at the YMCA. At this point, she had pretty much confined herself to the women's shelter. She wouldn't go out and do anything, wouldn't go out and hang out with friends. She just shut herself in. So on Tuesday, November the 20th, Emma left to go to the YMCA to get a membership, and this is where really bizarre things start to be caught on surveillance footage right before her disappearance. When she went to go and get her membership, she left and was acting strange. In the course of 14 minutes, she entered and exited the building a total of, I think, 4 to 6 times. And she appeared to be terrified of something outside. She was very nervous, very anxious. She kept, going out and peeking around the corner and then quickly coming back in and, seeming hesitant. It was almost as if she was worried someone was out there watching her or waiting for her. On the next day, Wednesday the 21st, she decided to tow her van, one of many times that she towed it in total, to the Chateau Victoria parking lot. And the entire time she was having it towed there, she was speaking to the man towing her van, saying she was so excited, she was planning on surprising her family, she was going to pack everything up and go home, which nobody would expect. 2 days later, on Friday the 23rd, Emma made a phone call to her mom around midnight, which would be the first in a string of very upset and indecisive phone calls. She was upset the entire time, crying, and she told her mom that she wanted to come home. Emma wouldn't tell her mom, Shelley, what was wrong with her, but she just said that she was safe, everything was fine, she just wanted to come home. Between Friday the 23rd and Wednesday the 28th at 4 a.m., Emma called multiple times, sometimes just hours after the previous phone call, switching her mind every single time. One time she would be desperate to come home, and the next time she would reassure her mom that she didn't need to, she would figure it out on her own. On the last phone call made at 4 a.m. on Wednesday the 28th, Emma had told her mom, "Don't come, Mom, please, not today." And despite telling her mother this, Shelley booked the next flight out that afternoon to come to Victoria. So the last words to her mother were, "I don't know how I can face you." And from the tone of her last phone call as well, Shelley knew something was very, very wrong with her daughter. And just a few hours later, Emma started planning things of her own. At 7 a.m., Emma gets up, leaves the Sandy Merriman house, and goes to her van in the Chateau Victoria to find a note on it saying that they were going to tow it if it wasn't moved. Now, she was visibly upset, according to the parking attendants, and she begged them to let her have one more day, which they agreed to, and then she moved on. At 8:23 a.m., Emma is seen at a 7-Eleven on the corner of Douglas and Humboldt Street. And she went into the 7-Eleven and purchased with her debit card a $200 prepaid credit card, which is strange in itself, but then to make it even stranger, she did the exact same thing that she had done at the YMCA just days before. She appeared incredibly nervous to leave the 7-Eleven. She kept peeking out the windows to make sure nobody was out there. She kind of stood back from the door a little while and just stared, and then after a few minutes, she finally left. At 10 a.m., a man claimed to have seen Emma standing on Pandora Street across from Alex Golden Hall, and she was in a jacket, had her hood up, she had bags over her shoulders, across her chest, in her hands, and she was just standing on the edge of the street, just kind of staring motionless. He was going to say something to her and then decided he needed to run in to, I think, renew an insurance card or something really quick, and was surprised when he came out to see her standing in the exact same spot, like she had not moved even in the slightest bit. He decided to go up to her and ask her if she needed any help, and she just shook her head no, and after staring at her for a little while and her seemingly being unresponsive, he decided to just go about his day. At around noon, one of Emma's friends saw her at a soup kitchen, and this friend approached Emma, and Emma's response was, "I don't feel good, I can't talk right now." He asked Emma if she needed a hug, and her response was absolute terror. She looked up at him, had an expression of complete horror on her face, and then ran off. Another witness saw her walking downtown with an older man, but this man has not been identified, and a lot of these sightings as well also haven't been completely confirmed, but they were important enough for her family to put it on her website, so I figured I would share them all here. Then between 4 and 6 p.m., someone sees Emma in two separate places. They first walk past each other on Douglas Street at the Bay Center, and then 45 minutes later, that same person was in a car driving on Douglas Street and sees Emma again walking in front of them. Now, she wasn't walking or acting in an average way. She was looking extremely confused. She seemed to be wandering in circles, not sure of where she was, and they actually ended up reporting it a few days after she was already reported missing. At 5:54 p.m., Emma shows back up at the 7-Eleven and purchases a pay-as-you-go cell phone. Now, this is one of the largest red flags in the case because, as I stated before, Emma did not believe in technology very much. She had actually never owned a cell phone in her entire life, and she was 26 years old. She would email back and forth, log into computers every once in a while to keep in touch with family because she liked writing, but the thought of texting someone or calling someone was just not worth her time. So for her to have purchased a cell phone means there was something serious going on. And yet again, as she went to exit the 7-Eleven, she exhibited the same nervous behaviors of just looking outside and being scared to go out there. At 6 p.m., Emma goes back to the Sandy Merriman house, and I've seen a couple of different versions of this particular bit of information. At the same time she's doing this, her mother is boarding a plane from home to come and get her. Now, her mother claims she never told the shelter she was coming, and as far as Emma knew, she wasn't coming because Emma had told her not to. But somehow someone working at the Sandy Merriman shelter told Emma that her mother was coming, and she immediately panicked and ran off. No one can really figure out if this actually did happen or how they would have known that her mother was coming, but that is just another bit of information that I found on her website. So at around 6:10 p.m., Emma hails a taxi, gets in and tells them that she wants to go to the airport. Now, to me, this kind of makes sense. She heard that her mother was coming, so she wanted to go and just hang out around the airport until she got there. That tells me that her first instinct right after being told her mom was coming, despite the fact that she panicked, was to go and wait for her mom. They had already talked to each other the past couple times that they had planned for her mother to come and help her, that she was going to show up at the airport and wait for her mom there, and then they would both go back to the Sandy Merriman house. So she seemed to be following the plan. But despite having almost $3,000 in her bank account and the $200 prepaid credit card, she ended up telling the cab driver that she could not afford the $60 fare to the airport. So instead, she told him to drive around the block one time and then drop her back off at the precise location that she had been picked up at. So he drove her around, dropped her off, and she said that she wasn't ready to get out of the car yet. She begged him to let her just sit in there for a minute. He was like, you know, I have to work, I can't do this. But she's like, please, I'm begging you, let me just sit in here for a minute. Then something came on, some sort of talking over either his radio or the actual car radio, and she absolutely panicked. She said, where is that talking coming from? What is that? So she paid the fare and then fled the vehicle immediately. Just a few minutes later, Dennis Quay, one of her acquaintances, I think she had met this man maybe one time, ends up seeing her on the street, and again, he is just as concerned because of her disoriented appearance. He claims that she was standing at a crosswalk, and despite it being the go-ahead for her to walk, she wouldn't move anywhere. It almost appeared as if she couldn't cross the street. He said she was barefoot, she looked paranoid, terrified. He walked up to her to check on her, and she actually did tell him to walk with her for a few minutes. So they walked around a little bit. At one point they reached a construction site where you have to walk. I guess, I know you guys probably know what I'm talking about. It's like when they're doing construction on a big building and you have to walk through a tunnel that's a sidewalk instead of just like a regular sidewalk. And she panicked. She refused to go inside. She wanted to go a completely different direction. And he just started asking her questions to make sure she was okay. And this made her incredibly uncomfortable once again. And because she did not like any of the questions he was asking, she decided to go her separate way. When they parted ways, he decided to duck into a restaurant right by the Empress Hotel, where she ended up just kind of standing around afterwards. And he was so concerned that he called the police. He waited there for the police to arrive. They arrived around 7:17 p.m. and at this point he thought she was in safe hands, so he left, but it didn't go the way he had hoped. Police found Emma around the front of the Empress Hotel. She wouldn't really cooperate very much with them. She just gave them yes or no answers, mainly only with shaking her head. She wouldn't really talk. The one time that she did talk to them, she just said she was working through some things and wanted to walk and meet with a friend. So after 45 minutes talking to Emma, police decided that she wasn't a threat to herself or others, and their hands were tied. There was no reason to take her in. She appeared in an okay mental state, so they had to just leave her. They would be the last people that we know of to see Emma. By 11 p.m., Shelly's mom arrives at Sandy Merriman and is shocked to find that her daughter isn't there. Now, at first she wasn't very alarmed. They just said that she had missed the curfew to get to bed. So at first she thought that maybe Emma just stayed with a friend. As we know, she hopped around from different places all the time. But after speaking a little bit to the people there, and when she realized that there was a lot more mentally going on with Emma than she even realized, by midnight they had filed a missing persons report. Now, Shelly was alone almost throughout this entire process. She had traveled to get Emma by herself despite her family telling her not to, and because of privacy laws she couldn't get any information that she needed. Sandy Merriman shelter wouldn't give her any information at all, and it got to the point where she was so persistent and just begging them and demanding information. As a mother, they told her she wasn't welcome anymore and gave her a cease and desist. And the police officers were not of much help either. They wouldn't give her any details because, again, Emma was an adult. She was 26 years old. They wouldn't give her any information when it came to their conversation with her outside of the Empress Hotel. And I know a lot of you guys are kind of on the fence about adults, and if they decide to run away and go somewhere, that's their decision. But when there's obvious evidence that something mentally was happening and she could be in danger, I feel like things should be a little bit different. But unfortunately, Emma's mom, Shelly, just hit wall after wall after wall. She decided to take off on her own. She got a hotel right across the street with a view of the shelter in case Emma came back.
Shelly Fillipoff stares longingly out her hotel window.
I can see the shelter from my bedroom window. I can sit in my bed and look at the shelter.
Sandy Merriman House, the last known place her daughter Emma stayed before she disappeared November 28th. For weeks, Shelly pounded the pavement and sat at the computer fielding tips.
She decided to walk around on foot and talk to anyone she could, and she somehow got information out of the shelter as to where Emma liked to stay, where she liked to hang out, the different places she frequented. And she went to all these places, asked the homeless population, asked people who claimed to be her friends if they had seen Emma, and not a single person had seen her. From questioning friends, co-workers, people she lived around at the shelter, the largest agreed upon theory by everyone, and one story that everyone pretty much gave to police, was that Emma planned on going home. They weren't able to find any indication that she had left the city. Now keep in mind, Emma didn't know that her mom was on her way there until late that night, and that's even a questionable bit of information. She might not have been told that. So if she had had enough and come to her breaking point, she could have just left. She didn't know her mom was coming to get her. But she had told people that she was preparing for some sort of move, and it wasn't always a move back home. In mid-November, she told a friend she was moving to Salt Spring Island. Others claimed that she said she wanted to sail a boat to Mexico with this older guy that nobody knew. There were reports that she was going with her father to Japan. She said she was going to Costa Rica. She said she was going to California. She'd even told some people she was going to live off-grid. Locations of where she possibly might have gone was not the only thing that friends gave up. This is when her mother and investigators really got to see more into her state of mind, because who knew her better than the people she spent every day around and watched her change to a different person between 2011 and 2012. Her friend said that in the early winter of 2011, shortly after arriving in Victoria, she started exhibiting interesting behavior. She started obsessively arranging patterns out of things like feathers, rocks, shells, food, any small items that she could find, and if you were there with her, she demanded that you did the exact same thing. At one point, her friends had actually contacted her father because they woke up in the middle of the night to Emma gone and found her outside in a euphoric state. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'm guessing she was just sitting there staring, which sounds very, very similar to what people were seeing the day that she disappeared. Her father at that point insisted that she come home, but as she had told her mother as well, she said she could figure it out on her own and everything was fine. Friends told police that she also expressed concerns about someone she had met back home previously that had been harassing her, but she never mentioned this person's name. She never said any more about it, and when they looked through her journals and poems, there was nothing mentioned of this person either. To add to this, the longer she stayed in Victoria, the more she became scared, seemingly, of men. She avoided any social situation to begin with towards the end there, but she really avoided any social situation that had men involved in it. While she had always been the type of independent, free-spirited, I don't need a man person, she had never been scared of men. She actually had, I think, a 2 or 3 month relationship with a man in Victoria. She first moved there. And when that relationship ended, it wasn't anything bad. It was actually a mutual agreement. So she didn't really seem to anyone else to have a reason to be scared of men other than the reports of this person who might have been a man harassing her. 2 weeks before her disappearance was when things really started becoming obviously wrong. It went past just a few small things that were a little bit strange to something is going on here and she needs some sort of medical attention or, you know, some sort of intervention. A friend drove by the shelter that Emma was staying in, and she was standing on the side of the street, soaking wet in the freezing cold, just staring at a group of crows, and she just continued to just blankly stare. People that worked at the shelter and her friends as well said that of all people, Emma, who loved sunshine and seeing outside, she would have her blinds shut at all times, and she was found multiple times moving all of her furniture outside. At one point, she just moved it to the front lawn, and then she moved it to the curb, and then she put it on the steps of some government building. And then she would move it back in, and then she would change her mind and move it back out. And when they asked why she was doing this, she told them that the furniture was making too much noise and talking too much. She began selling her belongings, donating them, or even throwing them away. She was trying to seemingly get rid of everything. At one point, the staff of the Sandy Merriman shelter decided to call police to do a well check because, again, privacy laws, they weren't allowed to call her parents. And when they called police, police would not come and do a well check on her, which I think is incredibly devastating because it could have possibly been a totally different ending to this story. But they denied it and they said for the shelter to call back if another instance happened. And for some reason that they can't explain, they never called back despite her increasingly odd behavior. Emma had many writings in a journal that police and her mother eventually got their hands on, but none of it really gave weight to any theory. When they went to get her car from the parking lot, it had almost all of her belongings in it. It had her laptop, her camera, her passport, recently borrowed library books, pillows, clothes. While I think this seems strange to a lot of people, I honestly think she was packing up. I think she was slowly trying to go home while fighting other demons at the same exact time. Despite the fact that her car had mechanical issues and she couldn't drive it and had to have it towed, I think her one thing that she was hanging on to if she was having a mental or an emotional breakdown was coming home, like getting to go and see her mother and her family and her friends and feeling comforted. And even though she couldn't work her car, I honestly think she had hope, and she was just doing it and packing up and pretending that she was getting ready to go home because she had nothing else left.
But everyone did know Emma was in trouble.
The staff at the shelter said, we think she's had an emotional breakdown. Certainly the phone calls to me indicated someone who wasn't well at all.
Shelley says she realizes now Emma is dealing with a serious mental health issue.
We're going back to square one and we're re-interviewing and talking to people again with very different kinds of questions.
Then something happened that could have changed the case. A week after Emma disappeared, someone used her debit card. At first, they thought, it's Emma, it has to be Emma. Everyone who got the news, they were like, finally, we knew she wouldn't just run away like this and lose all contact. When they looked further into it, it was actually a man that had found her debit card and used it to buy cigarettes. This man claimed to have found the card on a road right beside the entrance of a trail that was outside of Victoria. The man was still brought in just in case to be polygraphed and questioned, and he was completely ruled out. However, he made his own string of bizarre phone calls to Emma's mom, Shelley. And the first phone call, he apologized, said that he probably shouldn't even be calling her to begin with, but that he was sorry for what she was going through. And then in the next few phone calls, he started telling her that he was an alcoholic or a recovering alcoholic, and that he had no idea why police told her the specific location that he found the card because he didn't even remember himself. He claims the night that he picked it up, he was incredibly intoxicated, and he told police a specific route that he normally went when he ended up under the influence heavily, but he had never told them the specific location that he got the card because he didn't remember. But if he had found the card outside of a trailhead, that would make a lot of sense after we've seen the type of person Emma is. If she wanted to run, she would go where she was most comfortable, which is nature. And if you want to hide and get away from someone, the best place to go is down a trail. She was used to sleeping outside, camping, doing things on her own outside. She probably could have survived for a decent amount of time. They looked into the cell phone as well at this point, but it had never been activated, never been used, so that led them to nothing. They also checked her bank account, and there was no use on that either. So essentially, all the things that Emma had disappeared with, she either dropped along the way or never used. Her mom started going deeper into her belongings and found a poem written by Emma almost a year exactly before she disappeared. And this is what the poem says. To everyone. From Dead Emma. Hello. I figure someone will be on this computer at some point and will read this. Okay, so I'm dead. Floating about on energy or not, watching dying stars, reviving stars, dreaming milky dreams and shadow dancing on your timelines, or whatever. Good luck, every heart. I love you. M. This worried her mom immediately, and investigators, they thought this was some sort of suicide note. Even though she'd written it a year before, she says, "Hello everyone, from dead Emma." She talks about someone going through her computer eventually trying to piece together whatever puzzle she might have left behind her. But despite analysis by forensic experts and deeper analysis by her mom, it has been ruled out as a suicide note. They don't think it has any sort of intent. Her mother strongly believes that she was just a poetic person, and she wanted to make sure that she had some sort of will and testament of her own written up somewhere. That doesn't necessarily mean she had suicidal thoughts or tendencies. Despite it seeming so much like a suicide note, it was not. For 2 months, Shelley desperately searched the area as much as she could and was incredibly reluctant to come home. And her last little bit of hope while there was to hope that Emma would return to the Redfish Bluefish when it opened up for the season.
In the early moments of her search, Shelley figured her daughter Emma would turn up at any moment.
I thought that it would just be a matter of time. I'd go around a corner and I would see her.
Now she says she knows it won't be that simple. The efforts of Vic PD investigators and teams of volunteers have turned up nothing. Emma was scheduled to return to work at Redfish Bluefish restaurant last Friday. Her mom hoped she'd just show up, ready to rejoin society. She did not.
Haven't lost hope. That would be absolutely not the case. It's just going to take longer than I thought, I guess.
But the day came and went, and Emma never showed up, so reluctantly she went home. A few tips came in while still searching for Emma at home. They started a Facebook page. There was a picture of a girl sent in that looked exactly like Emma sitting in a coffee shop in Vancouver, but this girl confirmed that she was in fact not Emma. More pictures flooded in one after another. None of them, unfortunately, were her daughter. They started to zone in on a man named Julien Gouard. He had actually met Emma in Perth in 2011, right before she left, and he fell in love with her, but she did not have the same feelings back. And interestingly enough, he had moved to Victoria in 2012, right before she disappeared. Emma's parents found messages from Julien to Emma in the months prior to her disappearance, and they were all very forward. He was obviously upset that things didn't work out with them. He was very forward, and then just weeks after she disappeared, he sent a final message asking if he could build her a log cabin in the woods, which I thought was kind of interesting that he said, because the biggest reason in life that she was, upset and struggling was because her parents divorced, and her parents actually built her childhood home together. And so I find that kind of interesting, that weeks after she disappeared, whether he knew it or not, he was asking to build a house for her. It's almost like he was still desperate to somehow rope her in. At one point after Emma left, he even repeatedly called their home to try to get in touch with her, to the point where it was harassment, like absolute harassment. And he ended up sending an email to Emma's dad apologizing, saying that he shouldn't have handled the situation in the way that he did. And then he said something very interesting in the email. He said, "I'm sorry for the way I handled the situation. I don't want you to think I am stalking her like last time." So this immediately gave the identity of whoever she possibly met back home that was stalking her. This man openly admitted it in an email to her father, and her parents even saw behavior that he displayed that was harassing and almost stalking. So everyone started to question if it was just a coincidence that he ended up moving completely across the country to the exact place Emma was living. He moved right when she started displaying her very paranoid behavior. Now, everyone claims it was just coincidence, and he was actually brought in for questioning, and he passed a polygraph and was dismissed, but there are people still to this day that think he had something to do with it. People think his message weeks afterwards were to cover his butt because he didn't want anyone to suspect him, but even a year later, because of the harassment he was now receiving online from people, he decided to do another polygraph, go through another set of questions just to really rule himself out, and again, he passed. Friends and family continued to search all over Victoria. They searched parks and different communities. They even spread their searches to surrounding areas and parts of the United States. Took a dive team to search the harbor in case she had jumped in an attempt at suicide. but nothing was found of her anywhere. In 2014, the Fifth Estate, which is I think a TV show in Canada, covered her disappearance, and this really put her name out there. And they brought in a whole entire team of investigators to put a new fresh set of eyes on the case. And these are like the best of the best investigators from all different areas of criminology, forensic examination, everything. But still, no one could figure out what exactly happened to Emma. They put up a $25,000 reward. Nothing. Rumors were starting to circulate everywhere among her friends. There were a ton of unconfirmed sightings in Victoria and surrounding areas. One person even claimed to have seen Emma tear down her own flyer and throw it away. In 2014, a hitchhiker was seen matching Emma's description on Highway 3 in Nelson, British Columbia, near a Fillipoff family farm. Another came in 30 minutes away, and I think it's pronounced Slocan Valley, where another Fillipoff family member lived. And in 2016, a friend reported seeing Emma sleeping on the stairs of the Francophone Center in Kelowna, British Columbia. But despite these tips that at the time seemed pretty legitimate, and even the pictures of these girls that looked exactly like Emma to the point where they fooled her parents, her showing up in places that she would have likely ended up near family, nothing was ever confirmed and she was never found. As I said in the beginning of this video, there are a few theories that police like to narrow everything down from so they can pinpoint the best areas to search, the best, methods to go about conducting their investigation. But with Emma's case, there is information pointing to every single one of their normal theories. Her mother believes that she had developed paranoid schizophrenia, and that I think is the largest theory in her case. I think that is absolutely a possibility 100% from her behavior that she exhibited right before she disappeared and even the months before that. I saw somewhere and I wasn't able to confirm it, but apparently some sort of mental illness also ran in her family, which makes it that much more likely. But I feel like when it comes to paranoid schizophrenia and everyone writing that off as what happened and the reason why she might have run away, it is very, very possible that you can be paranoid about something to extreme lengths and it be very, very real. It not be paranoid schizophrenia. It is very, very possible. Oftentimes I feel like we see behaviors like that, paranoia, staring off into space, trouble with speech, and we just assume there's some sort of mental illness behind it. If someone was actually stalking her, which is something that had happened to her in the past, and that same person had moved to the city that she disappeared from just before this all happened, if you are scared enough of something, you can be paranoid. You can exhibit these exact same behaviors. Imagine going to see a scary movie, for instance, or experiencing something traumatic like a break-in. When you hear the slightest noise after that, like the smallest thing that you hear every single day, it can make you jump out of your skin. So I feel like her genuinely being scared and terrified and paranoid about something very real should not be dismissed at all in this case. Her friend said for months she had been avoiding social situations with men involved. If there was a man in her friend group that was making her incredibly uncomfortable. She was an absolutely stunning, amazingly beautiful young woman, and I'm sure that if there was a man out there that wanted her enough, the persistence could become terrifying. When it comes to possible paranoid schizophrenia, again, she did exhibit a lot of the behaviors, and with that, suicide could be a possibility. The note she had written a year before was not one of intent, and they didn't find anything else in the recent time that would have indicated suicide. There were definitely bits in her journal and poems that she said she was unhappy. She said that she wasn't enjoying life the way that she thought she should. I don't know if she said she was suffering from depression or, anything extreme along those lines, but you have to remember that doesn't necessarily mean suicide. Also, they had an expert come in. The last place she was seen was right in front of the harbor. So they searched it. They thought, what a perfect setup, what a perfect situation if she wanted to throw herself into the water. But according to the specialist, she would have stayed in the harbor based on the water flow. Yet here we are years later, they didn't find her in the harbor and she didn't show up to any of the beaches. So the chance that she had thrown herself into that water in that location was slim to none. But that does not rule out the possibility that she could have decided to choose a different location or a different method. If it was suicide, why would she have spent the entire day preparing. Why would she have bought the credit card? She didn't need it. Why would she have bought a prepaid cell phone? She didn't need it. Maybe it was to throw people off. I don't know. This is what I'm saying. It's like every possibility, you feel like you can dismiss it, but then there's 10 more things that back it up as a possibility. That whole entire day, she was obviously in distress. There were multiple witnesses. Just people going by on the street could look at her and realize something was very wrong. That also makes her a perfect target for a lot of people. And considering she was walking in the same area for hours, if someone observed her mental state long enough, or saw if she was maybe walking in a pattern, they easily could have preyed on her and taken her. So you can't rule out foul play either. Or if she really was being stalked, again, that could have been a perfect opportunity for someone who was stalking her to grab her. A few years after she had disappeared, a man that is still unidentified and that they are trying desperately to identify walked into a store and saw Emma's picture up, her missing persons flyer, and he tore it down in a fit of rage. And he turned to the owners of the store and he said, she's not missing. She's my girlfriend and she wants to be gone. She ran away on purpose from her parents. And he stormed out, absolutely infuriated. I still, as I said, have not been able to identify this man. But why would he have said that if he didn't actually know her? I don't understand why someone would go to the extent of saying those things vocally. He could have also had some sort of mental illness, could have just done it as a sick joke, but they're desperately trying to identify this man. And I find it interesting that not a single person's come forward to claim him. And it kind of makes you wonder if she possibly ran away and is a part of another portion of the homeless population. Maybe he was homeless as well, and that's why no one's coming forward to claim him. I believe that suicide is a likely theory. There was too much planning and buying things that you would need in order to survive and live for her to have wanted to end her life. But as recently as the Eugene Kim situation, you can't always assume that. At this point, I don't know if he committed suicide. I just know there wasn't foul play involved, and he bought a few things before he went and ended his life. I know that many people are still saying she's an adult. Even her father has said that he just hopes she got to leave by her own will and on her own decisions, and he just wants her to be happy. But there is way too much pointing to her having some sort of mental and emotional breakdown, and quite possibly she is suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And I don't care how old you are, when you are suffering from a mental illness that you cannot control, you cannot ignore it. No one can just ignore it just because you're an adult. At that point, you need intervention and you need help, and you don't even realize that you need it sometimes. And I think that could possibly be the case. She could have run away because of her paranoia and her fear. And while she's running from things that might not exist or seem relevant to us, her fear is very, very real. And it's a very scary situation if that is the case, because her mother is out here desperately trying to find her and help her and bring her home. But unexplainable things could be scaring her so much and keeping her away. And how do you find someone and help them when they have irrational fears that's forcing them into hiding? And know that it just takes you finding them to possibly help them. Like, that has to be the scariest situation in the entire world. I know that there are so many theories in this case because of how many different ways this case can go and how many different endings it could possibly have. And I'm very interested to see what you guys think in the comment section down below. This is a very highly publicized case, and I saw something interesting on the Fifth Estate where one of the officers dealing with the case said, you don't really look at homeless people, and that could make it 10 times harder to solve this case because that could very well be where she is at. So continue to post about her. There is a ton of information on her website. I will link that down below, as well as her Facebook page dedicated to finding Emma. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button to become a member of the Howlin' fam, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.